Chapter 5. The quickest way to gain leadership. Problem solving. According to F. Fornes, Writing in Coaching for Improved Work Performance, there are 4 common reasons why people do not perform the way they should. 1. They do not know what they are supposed to do. 2. They do not know how to do it. 3. They do not know why they should. 4. There are obstacles beyond their control. These 4 reasons why people fail to perform at their potential are all responsibilities of leadership. The first 3 reasons deal with starting a job correctly. A training program, job description, proper tools, and vision, along with good communication skills, will go a long way in effectively meeting the first 3 issues. This chapter will deal with the 4th reason that causes many people to fail to reach their performance potential. Problems continually occur at work, at home, and in life in general. My observation is that people don't like problems, weary of them quickly, and will do almost anything to get away from them. This climate makes others place the reins of leadership into your hands, if you are willing and able to either tackle their problems or train them to solve them. Your problem-solving skills will always be needed, because people always have problems. This chapter will deal with the 2 things needed to effectively solve problems: the right attitude and the right action plan. Before these 2 areas are explored, I want to share with you some observations I have made about people and their problems. We all have problems. Sometimes our problems overwhelm us, as they did my friend Joe. Before Joe could get out of his house and head for work, he had 4 long-distance calls. Everyone seemed to have a problem, and they all wanted Joe to get on a plane that day and come help out. He finally told his wife to forget about his breakfast. He rushed out of the house as fast as he could. Then, when he stepped into the garage, he discovered his car would not start. So he called a taxi. While he was waiting for the taxi, he got another call about another problem. Finally, the taxi came and Joe rushed out, piled in the backseat, and yelled, "All right, let's get going." "Where do you want me to take you?" the taxi driver asked. "The size of the person is more important than the size of the problem." "I don't care where we go," Joe shouted. "I've got problems everywhere." Sometimes we think our generation has more problems than the last. I laughed at this idea after I reflected on the words of Dwight Baumbach in What's Right with America. America's elders lived through the great 1929 stock market crash that ruined many of their families, the Depression years, the bonus march on Washington, when veterans were dispersed by Army troops, the New Deal years, Pearl Harbor, the loss of the Philippines, years of long days and nights in defense plants in the 1940s, fighting in Europe and the Pacific, D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, VE Day, the hope-filled beginning of the United Nations in America, the A-bomb, VJ Day, the Marshall Plan in Europe, the Berlin airlift, war in Korea, the U-2 incident, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the killings of President Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr., the Civil Rights Struggle, the Vietnam War, Americans on the Moon, Watergate and the resignation of a president and vice president, the energy crisis, 3 Mile Island, Iranian hostages, a new president shot in 1981, the bombing of our embassy and hundreds of Marines in Lebanon, becoming a debtor nation, with the highest budget deficit in history. What a lifetime! We should remember the words of Paul Harvey, who said that in times like these it is always helpful to remember that there have always been times like these. Problems give meaning to life. A wise philosopher once commented that an eagle's only obstacle to overcome for flying with greater speed and ease is the air. Yet, if the air were withdrawn and the proud bird were to fly in a vacuum, it would fall instantly to the ground, unable to fly at all. The very element that offers resistance to flying is at the same time the condition for flight. People need to change their perspectives, not their problems. The main obstacle that a powerboat has to overcome is the water against the propeller. Yet, if it were not for this same resistance, the boat would not move at all. The same law, that obstacles are conditions of success, holds true in human life. A life free of all obstacles and difficulties would reduce all possibilities and powers to zero. Eliminate problems, and life loses its creative tension. The problem of mass ignorance gives meaning to education. The problem of ill health gives meaning to medicine. The problem of social disorder gives meaning to government. In the South, when cotton was king, the boll weevil crossed over from Mexico to the United States and destroyed the cotton plants. Farmers were forced to grow a variety of crops, such as soybeans and peanuts. They learned to use their land to raise cattle, hogs, and chickens. As a result, many more farmers became prosperous than in the days when the only crop grown was cotton. The people of Enterprise, Alabama, were so grateful for what had occurred that in 1910 they erected a monument to the boll weevil. When they turned from the single crop system to diversified farming, they became wealthier. The inscription on the monument reads, "In profound appreciation of the boll weevil and what it has done to herald prosperity." We all have a tendency all of our lives to want to get rid of problems and responsibilities. When that temptation arises, remember the youth who was questioning a lonely old man. "What is life's heaviest burden?" he asked. The old fellow answered sadly, "Having nothing to carry." Many outstanding people have overcome problems in their lives. Many of the Psalms were born in difficulty. Most of the epistles were written in prisons. Most of the greatest thoughts of the greatest thinkers of all time had to pass through the fire. Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress from jail. Florence Nightingale, too ill to move from her bed, reorganized the hospitals of England. Semi-paralyzed and under constant menace of apoplexy, Pasteur was tireless in his attack on disease. During the greater part of his life, American historian Francis Parkman suffered so acutely that he could not work for more than 5 minutes at a time. His eyesight was so wretched that he could scrawl only a few gigantic words on a manuscript, but he contrived to write 20 magnificent volumes of history. Policies are many, principles are few. Policies will change, principles never do. Bury a person in the snows of Valley Forge, and you have a George Washington. Raise him in abject poverty, and you have an Abraham Lincoln. Strike him down with infantile paralysis, and he becomes a Franklin D. Roosevelt. Burn him so severely that the doctors say he will never walk again, and you have a Glenn Cunningham, who set the world's 1-mile record in 1934. Have him or her born black in a society filled with racial discrimination, and you have a Booker T. Washington, a Marian Anderson, a George Washington Carver, or a Martin Luther King Jr. Call him a slow learner and retarded, writing him off as uneducable, and you have an Albert Einstein. Dolly Parton sums it all up with these words: "The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you gotta put up with the rain. My problem is not my problem." There is a world of difference between a person who has a big problem and a person who makes a problem big. For several years I would do between 20 and 30 hours of counseling each week. I soon discovered that the people who came to see me were not necessarily the ones who had the most problems. They were the ones who were problem conscious and found their difficulties stressful. Naive at first, I would try to fix their problems, only to discover that they would go out and find others. They were like Charlie Brown in A Christmas Special, he just couldn't get the Christmas spirit. Linus finally said, "Charlie Brown, you're the only person I know who can take a wonderful season like Christmas and turn it into a problem." Linus, I have news for you. There are many people like Charlie Brown. Their problems are not their real problems. The problem is that they react wrongly to problems and therefore make their problems real problems. What really counts is not what happens to me but what happens in me. A study of 300 highly successful people, people like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Helen Keller, Winston Churchill, Albert Schweitzer, Mahatma Gandhi, and Albert Einstein, reveals that 1/4 had handicaps, such as blindness, deafness, or crippled limbs. 3/4 had either been born in poverty, came from broken homes, or at least came from exceedingly tense or disturbed situations. Always take the high road. Why did the achievers overcome problems, while thousands are overwhelmed by theirs? They refused to hold on to the common excuses for failure. They turned their stumbling blocks into stepping stones. They realized they could not determine every circumstance in life, but they could determine their choice of attitude toward every circumstance. I read about a church choir that was raising money to attend a music competition and decided to have a car wash. To their dismay, after a busy morning, rain began to pour in mid-afternoon, and the customers stopped coming. Finally, one of the women printed this poster: "We wash, and with an arrow pointed skyward, he rinses." The Los Angeles Times recently ran this quote: "If you can smile whenever anything goes wrong, you are either a nitwit or a repairman." I would add, or a leader in the making, one who realizes that the only problem you have is the one you allow to be a problem because of your wrong reaction to it. Problems can stop you temporarily. You are the only one who can do it permanently. A problem is something I can do something about. My friend and mentor, Fred Smith, taught me this truth. If I can't do something about a problem, it's not my problem, it's a fact of life. In 1925, an American company manufacturing and marketing shaving cream was concerned about the effectiveness of its roadside advertising. With the introduction of high-speed automobiles, they were concerned that nobody had time to read their billboards. So the company, Burma Shave, created a series of small signs spaced at sufficient intervals so they could be read even at high speeds. The unique approach to advertising made Burma Shave a household name for 46 years. As a child growing up in Ohio, I loved the Burma Shave advertisements. This was my favorite. "A peach looks good, with lots of fuzz, but man's no peach, and never was." The Burma Shave Company became creative with a changing society. If there had been no answer to the problem, then there would have been no problem, just a fact of life. Be careful in resigning yourself to the position that there is no answer to a problem. Someone else may come along with a solution. A test of a leader is the ability to recognize a problem before it becomes an emergency. Under excellent leadership, a problem seldom reaches gigantic proportions, because it is recognized and fixed in its early stages. Great leaders usually recognize a problem in the following sequence. 1. They sense it before they see it, intuition. 2. They begin looking for it and ask questions, curiosity. 3. They gather data, processing. 4. They share their feelings and findings to a few trusted colleagues, communicating. 5. They define the problem, writing. 6. They check their resources, evaluating. 7. They make a decision, letting. Great leaders are seldom blindsided. They realize that the punch that knocks them out is seldom the hard one, it's the one they didn't see coming. Therefore, they are always looking for signs and indicators that will give them insight into the problem ahead and their odds of fixing it. They treat problems like the potential trespasser of an Indiana farm who read this sign on a fence post: "If you cross this field, you better do it in 9.8 seconds. The bull can do it in 10 seconds. You can judge leaders by the size of the problems they tackle. In one of the Peanuts comic strips, Charlie Brown says, "There's no problem so big that I can't run from it." We all have felt exactly like the lion tamer who put this advertisement in the paper: "Lion tamer wants tamer lion." Yet, in my observations of people and their problems, I have noticed that the size of the person is more important than the size of the problem. Problems look larger or smaller according to whether the person is large or small. Recently, I spoke with Marcia, a lady who was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago and had a mastectomy. She is doing very well. But she shared with me a concern for others who had the problem and were not doing well. There seemed to be a big difference between Marcia and others who had the same problem. I could have predicted physical recovery for Marcia. She was positive from the beginning of her problem. Our focus as a leader should be to build big people. Big people will handle big issues effectively. Solve task problems quickly. People problems will take longer. Solving problems may be the immediate agenda, but that should never be where we spend most of our time. If all we do is focus on solving the next problem at hand, we will soon feel like the farmer who said, "The hardest thing about milking cows is that they never stay milked." Problems never stop, but people can stop problems. My suggestion for producing problem solvers are: 1. Make a time commitment to people. Those who never take time to develop people are forced to take time to solve their problems. 2. Never solve a problem for a person, solve it with that person. Take that individual through the sequence that has already been given for recognizing a problem. In fact, spend time with that person and study this entire chapter together. Problems should be solved at the lowest level possible. President John F. Kennedy said that President Eisenhower gave him this advice the day before his inauguration: "You'll find no easy problems ever come to the President of the United States. If they are easy to solve, somebody else has solved them." That statement should be true of every leader. Climbing the ladder of leadership means that fewer but more important decisions will be made. The problem-solving skills of a leader must be sharpened, because every decision becomes a major decision. John E. Hunter said, "A situation only becomes a problem when one does not have sufficient resources to meet it." The rest of the chapter will deal with what is needed to effectively solve problems. The right attitude. The subject of our attitude is so important for potential leaders that the next chapter will be given to it. Totally. Therefore, a few thoughts will be sufficient at this time. Norman Vincent Peale was right when he said that positive thinking is how you think about a problem. Enthusiasm is how you feel about a problem. The two together determine what you do about a problem. If I could do anything for people, I would help them change their perspectives, not their problems. Positive thinking does not always change our circumstances, but it will always change us. When we are able to think right about tough situations, then our journeys through life become better. G.W. Target, in his essay, The Window, tells the story of two men confined to hospital beds in the same room. Both men were seriously ill, and though they were not allowed much diversion, no television, radio, or books, their friendship developed over months of conversation. They discussed every possible subject in which they both had interest or experience, from family to jobs to vacations, as well as much of their own personal histories. Neither man left his bed, but one was fortunate enough to be next to the window. As part of his treatment, he could sit up in bed for just an hour a day. At this time he would describe the world outside to his roommate. In very descriptive terms he would bring the outside world inside to his friend, describing to him the beautiful park he could see, with its lake, and the many interesting people he saw spending their time there. His friend began to live for those descriptions. After a particularly fascinating report, the one man began to think it was not fair that his friend got to see everything, while he could see nothing. He was ashamed of his thoughts, but he had quite a bit of time to think, and he couldn't get this out of his mind. Eventually his thoughts began to take their effect on his health, and he became even more ill, with a disposition to match. One evening his friend, who sometimes had difficulty with congestion and breathing, awoke with a fit of coughing and choking and was unable to push the button for the nurse to come to his aid. The frustrated, sour man lay there looking at the ceiling, listening to this struggle for life next to him, and doing nothing. The next morning the day nurse came in to find the man by the window dead. After a proper interval, the man who was so eager to see out that window asked if he could be moved, and it was quickly done. As soon as the room was empty, the man struggled up on his elbow to look out the window and fill his spirit with the sights of the outside world. It was then he discovered the window faced a blank wall. The right action plan. Is it not true that too many times we have a surplus of simple answers and a shortage of simple problems? Occasionally we all feel like the guy in a cartoon who said, "I try to take just one day at a time, but lately several days have attacked me at once." One thing is certain, life is not problem-free. The story is told that when the Apollo series of space vehicles was being designed, a rift developed between the scientists and the engineers. The scientists insisted that every available ounce of weight be reserved for scientific equipment that could be used to explore and report on outer space. They wanted the engineers to design a space vehicle that would be free from all defects. That was the era when zero defects was a popular expression in industry. That would mean a large proportion of the space and weight would be available for scientific equipment. The engineers argued that this was an impossible goal. They contended that the only safe assumption was that something would go wrong, but they could not predict with certainty where the malfunctions would occur. Therefore, they would need to build in a series of backup systems to compensate for every possible malfunction. That would mean far less weight and cargo space would be available for scientific equipment. Allegedly this conflict was resolved by asking the astronauts in training which assumption they supported. They all voted in favor of lots of backup systems. This story illustrates the importance of assumptions. Some people assume that a defect-free system can be developed for their lives. Others assume that something will go wrong, and they need a backup system. Too many times when a problem arises, we want to blame someone else and take the easy way out. Recently I studied a humorous problem-solving chart that underscores our desire to duck responsibility. The problem-solving process. Now, Even if we don't wish to duck responsibilities and we have the right attitude and a solid action plan, it is still important to follow a process when we're looking for a solution. I suggest following these steps to problem solving. Identify the problem. Too many times we attack the symptoms, not the cause. Ordering your staff to stay at their desks until quitting time is a band-aid solution that does not answer the question, why does the staff leave early? Your job is to identify the real issues that lie beneath the symptoms. Failing to do this places you in the same situation as a young soldier who was learning to parachute. He was given the following instructions. 1. Jump when you are told. 2. Count to 10 and pull the ripcord. 3. In the very unlikely event that it doesn't open, pull the second chute open, and 4. When you get down, a truck will take you back to the base. Prioritize the problem. Richard Sloma says never to try to solve all the problems all at once, make them line up for you one by one. Whether you face 3 problems, 30, or 300, make them stand in single file so you face only one at a time. Approach these problems, not with a view of finding what you hope will be there, but to get the truth and the realities that must be grappled with. You may not like what you find. In that case, you are entitled to try to change it. But do not deceive yourself. What you do find may or may not be the real problem. Define the problem. In a single sentence, answer the question, what is the problem? Bob Beale encourages us to keep in mind the difference between solving a problem and making a decision. A decision is a choice you make between 2 or more alternatives, such as, should I fly to Phoenix or Chicago? A problem is a situation that's counter to your intentions or expectations. I meant to fly to Chicago, but I ended up in Detroit. Or, I meant to have $50,000 in the bank, but I'm $50,000 in the hole. Defining the problem in a single sentence is a 4-step process. 1. Ask the right questions. If you have a vague idea, don't ask a general question, such as, what is happening here? And don't speculate. Instead, ask process-related questions. 2 words that always govern my questions are trends and timing. Most problem trails can be sniffed out if specific questions are asked in these 2 areas. 2. Talk to the right people. Beware of authorities with a we know better attitude. These people have blind spots and are resistant to change. Creativity is essential for problem solving. In leadership conferences I often illustrate the principle by using the 9-dot problem. 3. Get the hard facts. Remember Peter Drucker's words, once the facts are clear, the decisions jump out at you. For example, don't let someone say to you, that person is a good worker. Get concrete examples of that individual's performance. Listen to what is not being said and gather the important data. 4. Get involved in the process. Most problems are not what they seem. Don't just ask the right questions and gather hard facts. Get involved in the process by doing the actual jobs of the people concerned and see what problems arise. Problems should be solved at the lowest level possible, because that is where they appear. That is also the level where they are most clearly defined. Select people to help you in the problem-solving process. Socrates developed this method 2,400 years ago. After defining the problem at hand, he would gather others around him and ask for their opinions and logical support to back their opinions up. As self-appointed gadfly, Socrates spent most of his life causing trouble in complacent, conservative Athens. By debating, cajoling, and prodding, he forced Athenians to question beliefs they took for granted. This finally got him into trouble. The Athenians charged him with impiety toward the gods and corrupting Athens' youth. He was thrown into prison, tried, and sentenced to death. After a month, during which he refused friends' offers to help him escape, Socrates drank a cup of hemlock and died. Nobody expects you to go that far. But practicing the Socratic method will help you to be a better leader. Before inviting people to attend a problem-solving meeting, ask these questions. Is it a real problem? Is it urgent? Is the true nature of the problem known? Is it specific? If people talk about everything, they will eventually talk about nothing. Has the group most competent to discuss the problem been invited, and is each participant concerned about solving this issue? Collect problem causes. List all the possible causes of the problem by asking what caused the problem and how the problem can be avoided in the future. Collect problem-solving solutions. List as many solutions to a problem as possible. The more, the better. Seldom is there just one way to solve a problem. Options are essential because a problem continually shifts and changes. The leader without a backup solution for the primary answer will soon be in trouble. Prioritize and select the best solutions. Weigh all the possible solutions before deciding. The following questions should always be asked by the leader. Which solution has the greatest potential to be right? Which solution is in the best interests of the organization? Which solution has momentum and timing on its side? Which solution has the greatest chance for success? Implement the best solution. Norman Bushnell, founder of Atari, said, "Everyone who's ever taken a shower has an idea. It's the person who gets out of the shower, dries off, and does something about it who makes a difference." Evaluate the solution. Let others test it out and punch holes in it. If they punch intellectual holes, such as, "I don't think it will continue working because," ignore them. If they point out real operative problems you can observe, then you must make the adjustment. Ask these questions to evaluate the responses. Were we able to identify the real causes of the problem? Did we make the right decision? Has the problem been resolved? Have the key people accepted this solution? Did I help people to develop problem-solving skills to manage conflict in the future? Set up principles or policies to keep problems from recurring. Whereas policies are set up for a particular function in a specific area, principles are guidelines for everyone and are more general. Policies change when their use is no longer essential. Principles do not change. Policies are many. Principles are few. Policies will change. Principles never do. Policies work well for lower management and operational matters. A policy should never be held on to and defended when it impedes the program and delays the change needed to make progress. A policy's intent is to give clear direction and allow a better flow in the organization. Many operational problems will stay solved with the implementation of solid policy. A principle within my organization is, always take the high road. This principle means that whenever there is debate, question, tension, or confrontation between staff and people, I always expect my staff to give the benefit of the doubt to others. This principle is for everyone in my organization at all times. It may have nothing to do with an operational procedure that concerns machines and paper, but it has everything to do with people. To teach principles effectively to my staff, I must model them, relate them by answering the question, how can I use this in my life? And applaud when I see the principles being applied in their lives. Later on in this book I will spend an entire chapter on the importance of having the right people around you. In regard to problem solving, if you are always the problem solver and never teach the people around you to think and decide for themselves, you will have a dependent group of followers. Many years ago I decided to focus on helping people solve problems rather than helping solve people's problems. These suggestions are some approaches you should find effective. Never allow others to think you always have the best answers. This will only make them dependent on you. Ask questions. Help people to think through the entire process of their problem. Become a coach, not a king. A coach brings out the best in others, helping them to reach deep down inside and discover their potential. A king only gives commands. List their solutions on paper. Integrate your ideas with theirs until they have ownership of them. Ask them to decide on the best solution to their problem. Develop a game plan. Ask them to take ownership and responsibility for the game plan. Let them set up a time frame and an accountability process. Your goal should be that when the meeting is over, the other person has processed the problem, selected a solution, developed a game plan, and taken ownership of it. His or her relationship with you will not be a dependent one, but a deepening one.